Stair Construction, Unit 3, Lesson 1. Calculating and framing a landing for a quarter-turn stair. Upon completing this unit, you will be able to calculate all dimensions needed to build a landing for a quarter-turn stair to meet the International Residential Code. And you will be able to frame a basic quarter-turn stair landing. Here we have a plan view of a quarter-turn landing. Note our landing dimensions. IRC requires that we have at least 36 inches by 36 inches for the landing size. We will also leave space at the bottom of the upper stringer so that the nosing of the first tread can protrude properly and still meet the minimum 36-inch clearance. Here is a cross-section of the lower stringer and landing. We will need to determine the height of the landing before we can proceed further. Here are the calculations for our quarter-turn landing example. We will use the total rise of 75 3/4 inches, and we want the landing to be at the halfway point of the total rise. To find the finished height of the finished landing, we simply take the total finished rise and divide by 2. Note that we only divide by 2 if we want the landing to be at the halfway point of the rise. If the landing is at another tread position, we first need to determine the unit rise based off of the total finished rise, and then multiply the unit rise by the number of risers the landing will be set. In our example, our landing height is calculated to be 37 7/8 inches from the top of the lower finished floor to the top of the finished landing. Since all the flooring materials are the same in this example, we can also say that the subfloor to subfloor height of the landing is 37 7/8. To find the height of our ledgers, we need to subtract the thickness of the landing subfloor. So our ledger height would be the finished landing height minus the subfloor thickness, or 31 1/8 inches. Next, we need to determine the width and depth of the landing. Remember that the IRC states that our landing needs to be 36 by 36 when it's finished. I like to build my landing so that my upper stringer rests on top of my landing. To allow room for the heel of the upper stringer to sit on the landing, we need to extend the landing in the direction of the upper stringer. We also need to allow room for the various material thicknesses that will be installed on the face of the upper stringer and the opposite wall of the landing. To keep things simple, we just add 4 inches of clearance. This will be enough room to allow for the installation of our sub-riser and finished riser, our tread nosing overhang, and for drywall on the opposite wall. We will also add 1 unit run for the heel of our upper stringer to fully rest on the landing. So our math goes as follows: 36 inches for the IRC, plus 4 inches, plus our unit run of 10 inches, gives us a long dimension of 50 inches for our landing. Here is our corner wall assembly in which we will construct our quarter-turn landing. First, we want to measure up by the 37 1/8 inches that we calculated previously to be our ledger height, and make a mark. And then we make another mark up by the thickness of the landing subfloor, in this case 3/4 inch. Then we need to mark a level line across the area of our landing to aid us in installing our ledger boards so that they're level. We can now cut our first ledger to the long dimension of our landing, in this case 50 inches, and install it in the space. If we're installing this permanently, we would use construction adhesive and screws. For labs, use screws only, please. The adjacent ledger needs to be cut shorter than the dimension of our landing by 2 2x widths, or 3 inches. Since our short landing width is 36 inches, we subtract 3 inches for a ledger board length of 33 inches. and installed it in the same way that we installed the first ledger. We can build support walls to carry the landing. The outside dimensions of your support walls should match the 36 by 50 inch landing dimensions. We can now complete the landing framing and fill in the landing joists at 16 inch on center. And then we can install the subfloor of the landing. Note, however, that we extend the subfloor over the lower stringers to create the nosing on the landing. We need to do this since the application will be with carpet and the landing nosing will need to protrude the same as our treads. The upper floor subfloor should protrude in the same manner so that all treads and landings in the stair have the appropriate nosing overhang. Don't forget about fire blocking. Anytime you have a ledger, you need a fire block. We can now install our hanger board onto the face of our landing for the lower stringer. For the upper stringer, we will set back the first riser of the upper stringer back 4 inches beyond our code minimum of 36 inches. Remember that this is to allow for riser materials, tread nosing overhang, and drywall on the opposite wall. We also need to cut a small notch at the subfloor overhang of the lower stringer to allow for the drywall and skirt boards to be installed. Remember to install the 1.5 inch spacer board on the inside of any stringer that is flanked by a wall. This is our space for drywall and the skirt board. Refer to the flooring material concepts lesson for how to locate the top of your stringer. Be sure to double check your stringer to ensure that they are level. And repeat the process for the upper stringer. And again, remember to install the spacer board between the wall and the stringer. Here is a review of our landing dimensions. To the upper left is our lower stringer. On the bottom right is the upper stringer. Your lab is to build with a partner a mock-up of a quarter-turn stair with a total finished drives of 80 and 5/8 inches, with a landing at the top of the 4th riser. Calculate and draw the stair, and then build and install the landing, and lay out, cut, and mock up one lower and one upper stringer.